Is the Trending Buffalo podcast for the 19th of October, 2012. And as promised, I'm joined by author Brian O'Leary. His first book is entitled Spygate, the Untold Story. And I'm glad it exists. I'll tell you, Brian, and I think I mentioned this to you in an email, but it's one of those things where I just feel like screaming every now and then, why aren't we still talking about this?
Right.
And you obviously had that inside of you, or we wouldn't have a book that came out of it.
Exactly. The genesis of the book was, as the Patriots were getting on that run at the end of the year and were heading into the Super Bowl, there was an interview that Bob Costas did with Tom Brady. And the question Bob Costas asked Tom was, why do you think the Patriots are the most reviled sports organization, bar none? And Brady looked into the camera thoughtfully and said, well, gee, I hope it's not because we win a lot of games and we do things the right way and we're a classy organization. And I almost fell off my couch. I thought, well, it could be that, or it could be that you stole 3 Super Bowls from the rest of the NFL and got away with it. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, if I really put my mind to this, I think I could create a compelling case that this was a lot more, and that if I could find statistical proof that while they were cheating, they had an advantage that no other team had, I knew that I could have a good book. Hopefully you believe that.
Oh, absolutely, and that's why I've got you on. The thing is, I am not typically a conspiracy guy. There are people who just want to eat that sort of thing up.
Right.
But something has not been sitting right with me about this Patriots team since the first year Brady was in there. And I remember being out at Ralph Wilson Stadium here in Orchard Park, New York, when the Bills lost a tight one to the Pats. And I remember it was actually the game where Drew Bledsoe was on the sideline. And I remember thinking, this quarterback can't play. And if they're not going to use Drew Bledsoe, I wonder if we can get him in here. And ultimately, Tom Donahoe was thinking the same thing. They ended up bringing him in, but it was not an impressive performance. They ended up there was a weird ruling, and they lucked into winning the game in overtime. But that was the beginning of what has turned out to be essentially a decade of this team confusing me by always finding the one tiny little opening in a defense in a way that has just been uncanny. And so many things have happened over the years that I haven't been able to put my finger on. I found myself going through your book, which I ripped through in the span of about 3 nights. I found myself saying, I had a weird feeling about that. And I agree here, because a lot of what you're doing is speculating, but you're basing it on facts and kind of putting a story together. I was with you the whole way, Brian.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And I think it is important for your listeners to note that although I get a lot of negative people, let's say New Englanders, saying, well, this guy is just using circumstantial evidence, I think it's important to really think about the way evidence is introduced in any case like this. And that is, you have them being caught cheating, right? We didn't speculate that they cheated. This book is not about Tom or about Peyton Manning taking steroids. We know they cheated. That's first and foremost. Secondly, there's a lot of information that was documented by some very well-known people like Chris Mortensen, Andrea Kramer, and others that I bring out in the book that nobody has ever heard. Then we have direct testimony from an employee who worked there and was employed for the express purpose of stealing the signals, okay? So I have everything in my book that you would have in a book about the O.J. Simpson murder. Those books are not going to have an interview with O.J. Simpson.
Right.
It becomes corroborating evidence. It becomes a fact when you have enough corroborating evidence that all fit this narrative. And their narrative is they had a sophisticated cheating system on both sides of the ball. It was widely known in the NFL. They were warned to stop, and at the moment they were warned to stop, they already had 3 Super Bowls. The team was worth over $1 billion. Both Brady and the coach were millionaires. All they had to do, if this really wasn't that important, was stop at that moment, and we would never have known that they had stolen those Super Bowls. But it was so important to Belichick that he rolled out the cheating apparatus in the very first opportunity against an ex-coach that knew it was coming. Why do you do that if it's not important?
Right. And now let's go to the next thing that screams hey, somebody look into this, and that is the destruction of the evidence. The NFL takes in these tapes
Right.
and immediately says, okay, burn them, and we've made our decision, and here it is, and it's final, and we're good now.
Well, it's
And
worse than that. It's worse than that, Brad. Okay, they destroyed the Jets tape because somehow somebody that worked for the Jets leaked it to Jay Glazer. It actually showed up on Fox that weekend, the very next weekend, and of course the NFL went into complete, flip-out mode. And so what they did was they dispatched two executives, Jeff Pash and Ray Anderson, went up to Foxborough, gathered up all the additional tapes because you can imagine they'd been doing this for years.
Sure.
So their tape stash must have been extensive. Well, instead of bringing it all back in suitcases so the NFL brass could see exactly what advantage the Patriots may or may not have had, they destroy it in Foxborough. I have the quote in my book.
Yeah, that's right.
Ray Anderson calls back,
That's right.
and Goodell says, get rid of it. Get rid of it. Who says that when they're doing an investigation? That's a cover-up.
Yeah. Well, and the bottom line is, and this is where you point in the book, and it's where my brain was pointing right when it happened, the biggest issue to Goodell and the league was not, hey, somebody cheated, but
Right.
hey, what can this mean for us going forward if
Integrity.
nationally everybody picks up on it and starts thinking the types of things about our game that are actually true when the Patriots are involved?
Yes, it was the integrity of the game, and that point is the thing that really stops people from really getting into what the book is all about. They think, well, wait a minute, you're trying to tell me that the Maras and the Rooneys and Woody Johnson and all these people who were personally defrauded out of trophies would stand shoulder to shoulder and tell the public, it's fine, they didn't have a big advantage, we are comfortable with this investigation, when they knew that it was worse than they were letting on. And the answer to that is yes, and as you read in the book, I prove it in the chapter called The NFL Cover-Up.
Yeah.
And the NFL cover-up proves my theory, which is a fact, because the NFL owners were telling us on April 1st, coincidentally, April Fool's Day of 2008. However, they didn't interview Matt Walsh for another month, and Matt Walsh had additional tapes. So if Matt Walsh had come forward, and he may have, we don't know, with tapes of walkthroughs and Super Bowls and stories like Tom Brady told me he couldn't have done it without me. After the first Super Bowl, he gave me a cigar and said, I knew the defense 90% of the time. If he had said all that, if he had those tapes, then the owners would have been lying. So why were they telling us that everything was settled when they hadn't even interviewed the key witness? It's not logical. They knew, and the commissioner knew, that they were going to put the kibosh on this witness, and that they were going to silence him and take his tapes and destroy those too. And that's pretty much what they did.
I feel the need to point out right now that when you read the book, you're going to have to go along for the ride on a little bit of speculation. And you're going to have to decide if you agree with Brian's sort of presumptions that come out of the facts that are compiled.
Right.
But they're compiled in such a way that you make a compelling enough case that you didn't lose me once. I mean, it's
Okay.
There's so much in there, Brian, little stories that I forgot about. I've kind of, like I said, I've smelled a rat here for a while.
Right.
And there are little things that have popped up that I was reminded of in the book. For example, the Art Modell thing going back. I'll give anybody here $10,000 if you can tell me what the hell Ernie Adams does. Like
Right.
that thing, I vaguely remember that story. And I'm like,
Right.
oh yeah, that's right. Let's connect that to this. The Doug Flutie part, and actually refresh my memory on that, because that was just a real quick mention. But there was some quote from Flutie at some point and then he's never talked about it again. What was that?
Right. Well, the original thought or data point was that when Chris Mortensen was filing his report, of course, the day the event happened, nobody knew how big the scandal was, how big the cheating was, or what the final verdict was. No reporter could have known that this was going to be covered up so quickly. So Chris Mortensen reported that in addition to the taping of signals, the Patriots are also caught using multiple radio frequencies in clear violation of what teams are allowed to do. And I thought to myself, okay, extra radio frequency, Spygate. So I start searching for that on the internet, and I find story after story after story referring to Doug Flutie, who relayed a story to his friends and was reported on talk radio and at the Ticket in Miami with Dan Lebitard. And basically the story goes like this. Doug Flutie is playing backup quarterback. He's on the sidelines in 05. He plays for New England. Looking for his helmet so he can listen in on the play calling, he accidentally picks up Tom Brady's helmet and holds it sideways to his ear. He remarks that he's shocked to learn that there is no 15-second cutoff. They continue to talk to Tom Brady right through the snap. They're telling him what the defenses are. They're telling him perfect adjustments. And, when he's asked about it, he's told, don't worry about it. And then once this story becomes known, of course, many people want to interview Doug Flutie to get him to repeat it. Well, by then, he'd been coached by a Patriot owner and fans or whoever. And so now he won't repeat it, but he also conspicuously doesn't deny it. So essentially, it happened, or he'd be denying it.
Or he wouldn't have said it the first time. I mean, it's just so.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, I apologize. There we go. I'm just saying, or he wouldn't have said it the first time. I mean,
right. It either happened or it didn't.
Right.
When people go to I've done call-in shows with radios in Boston, and people have called in, and they've said, "This is ridiculous. How can you should be sued. How can you put this down?" Well, because this is what reporters do. And I did try to contact Doug Flutie. I did try to get him to reiterate it, but we already know he won't do that. Are you doubting that Chris Mortensen, very well-known, famous ESPN reporter, would report that they were using alternate radio frequencies? Are you doubting that? No one's doubting that. But interestingly, when I talked to Chris, when I tried to talk to Chris to get him to corroborate what it was used for, how he knew about it, how it was discovered, how he learned about it, since almost no other reporter on planet Earth knows this frequency was there, Chris Mortensen politely declined the interview request. Oh. Now, he's a reporter, and I'm an investigative author. Why would he have need to not talk to me at all?
Because he's got to keep doing what he does. And
exactly.
I mean, that's, yeah.
The NFL's telling them in no uncertain terms to put the kibosh on it. And that's why this book probably won't be talked about on ESPN ever.
Yeah, well, hey, what can you do? You got to feel good that you got this out there, and I'm sure you're hearing from a lot of people who are saying similar things to what I am.
Right.
Just a lot of things that just didn't make a ton of sense. A story that when it was when I read it in your book, I was like, oh yeah, I remember this. Charlie Weiss on the field, I think in Tampa Bay, saying something along the lines of, "We know all your plays, and we still couldn't beat you. Good job." It's like.
Right. Yeah, I mean, when you put all the dots together, it's inescapable. Like I said, it's not circumstantial evidence. It's corroborating evidence that leads to a fact. And then, of course, the end of the book, I hired a PhD of statistical science to study data points where a cheating system would show up in the performance. And that's where it sort of puts people over the edge. The whole book, as you said, I'm connecting dots, and people are saying, okay, that sounds reasonable. Wow, I didn't know that. Then they get to the statistics, and most people think, well, that just proves it. I mean, if you catch somebody using performance-enhancing drugs and they ran a 7-second 100-yard dash, well, then the cheating caused the 7-second 100-yard dash. It's simple. What people have missed is that from 07 forward, the Patriots are still good. So they say, okay, well, then I guess the cheating really didn't matter. But that doesn't have any impact. Tom Brady at 30 is obviously a much better player than he was coming off the sideline as a 6th-round draft choice.
Isn't your assumption, though, at least as mine is, if you went far enough to write the book, you probably don't trust the Patriots still either. So even if they're not doing the things that they were doing then, the reason that Ernie Adams is this shadowy figure and works with Belichick seems to be because he's a really smart guy that can come up with ways to beat the system. And
right.
in an era where we're shutting down Melky Cabrera, and we shut down Barry Bonds, and we're shutting down Lance Armstrong, doesn't it only make sense that people are trying to win and trying to gain any edge they can,
yeah.
and anything that you can't test for, like thinking through new ways to do things. It seems like every team should be employing someone trying to come up with these sorts of strategies,
Right.
and they have done a better job of it. So why would we think? Why would I trust that the Patriots are competing on a level playing field now?
Well, I would answer that this way. In the book, the statistics show that from 2007 forward, they win one more home game per year, and they lose one more away game per year. So away from their Gillette Stadium, they're just a pretty good team. But at Gillette Stadium, they're nearly impossible to beat. And that shouldn't happen in a league that's based on parity. So my answer would be Ernie Adams is still doing something. They're still hiring cardboard cutouts as coordinators that have nowhere near the resume for that job. And yet somehow, no matter who they plug in, whether it's Bill O'Brien or an empty chair, which they've done many times,
Named Josh McDaniels,
they're still tops in the league. So, yes, I agree they're using a non-football system that is X's and O's. It's got to have something to do with the system that Ernie Adams runs, but it may not be legal. It may not be. We don't know that.
What would your guess be as to how the majority of this information remains a secret? When players are cut, when they're spiteful about the situation, when Richard Seymour gets shipped out to Oakland, or Lawyer Malloy got cut and came here, or whatever. How does it remain?
That's a question I get a lot, and the answer is not many people are in on it. When you read the book, you realize that Ernie Adams doesn't even talk to the players at all.
Yeah.
Think about that. Here's a guy who's coached with Bill Belichick for 40 years, and he's an integral part of the system, and yet he never speaks to the players. Some of them don't even know his last name. So the people that are in on it naturally are the coordinators, Belichick, Adams, and the quarterback, Tom Brady. None of the other players know.
Right.
I mean, think about it. When you're a tight end in the huddle, you hear Tom Brady's call. You don't hear anything else. Your helmet's not wired.
Right.
Tom Brady doesn't talk in the locker room about the fact that they got a lot of great information that game. They keep this very, very tight. Anybody who covers the Patriots, for instance, I just talked to a guy yesterday from the New York Post. He's up there now for their game this weekend. He said it's like no other training facility. It's like the CIA. Everything's super, super tight security. Now, why would that be?
Yeah.
They're guarding secrets.
Well, and the other funny thing, too, is the people who are in on it and eventually use their success in New England to move on to bigger and better things, head coaching jobs, other offensive coordinator jobs, quarterbacking the Kansas City Chiefs after one season for Matt Castle.
Right.
Those people certainly are better served to keep a wrap on anything that they might know, because it would sully their reputation and therefore diminish their ability to make giant money elsewhere.
Exactly. And one coach notably did try to recreate the system. Right?
Yeah.
Josh McDaniels went to Denver, brought the same videographer that they had been using in New England, got caught again. That's another data point almost nobody knows.
No,
How is it that no fan knows that there was a second Spygate incident involving an expatriates coach and the son of the current assistant head coach of the New England Patriots, who's currently banned for life from the NFL? Nobody knows that. They read it in the book and they say, wait a second. When was this covered? For 1 hour on one day?
Right. And that's another one, Brian. I like I said, there are so many things where I went, oh, yeah, you know what? That does sound familiar. I remember that. With San Francisco being involved, and it was the same guy, and this is the same guy that Matt Walsh referenced, and suddenly he's out, and McDaniels is out, and the only place he can go is back to New England, and it's just, it's crazy.
And what does McDaniels say when he's caught? He gets his coaches in a room and says, look, it wasn't me. This isn't who I am. This isn't what I'm about. It's not like in New England where they practiced it. They coached it. They worked on it. Well, gee, Josh, who's they? Didn't you just come from there like a year ago? Who would say that?
All right.
But yet he said it, and he's quoted as saying it, and it's in my book. Now, was I in the room when he said it? No. But one of the people in the room said it to Jay Glazer of Fox Sports. So I think I have every right to print it in my book as a factual statement.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it is whatever. I don't have to keep explaining away. This is a book that some people are going to read and say, this guy's nuts. He's a conspiracy theorist. Well, you know what? Yeah, you're theorizing that there is a conspiracy because there are a lot of facts that point in that direction. And you can read it and choose not to believe it. But I'll tell you what, here in Buffalo, I think we want to believe it. I think your book's going to sell here, Brian.
Well, don't you think the nail in the coffin is the statistical performance? I mean, you can't be 3 standard deviations away from the league and then say to me that the cheating didn't matter.
Yeah, I don't remember everything about bell curves from statistics classes, but I do know that when everything is, the vast majority are contained within the first deviation, and then it starts trickling out, and then there's a blank space, and then the Patriots show up.
And then the Patriots.
That there's probably something somewhat weird about that.
Yeah, let me just give your listeners a quick one, okay? If you're using a cheating system and getting away with it, then therefore you would always perform a little better than the Vegas line setters would predict. So a team cheating and getting away with it, an effective system would produce a result that would frequently beat spreads. The Patriots beat the spread about 64% of the time while they were cheating. No other team is remotely close. There's 1 standard deviation away, 2 standard deviations away from the average, encompasses the entire NFL, and that's what normal statistical rules would indicate. Nobody should be beyond 2. No one should be near 3. They're 3. They're 3 standard deviations away. And then you go away from them, and the next best team is Green Bay, and then everybody falls in line behind them. There's no gap. That giant gap is the cheating. On paper, footprint, caught. And when I got that, I enlisted the help of the modern-day Jimmy the Greek, Wayne Allen Root, so I'm sure a lot of your listeners know. He sells a service in Vegas, tells you who's going to win on Sunday. And he looked at the numbers, and he said, wow, I'm just beside myself. I always thought of myself as a cynical guy, but people ask me about the cheating and the effect on the games. I've never seen a 10-year study. I've never seen anybody lay it out like this, but there's no way a team beats Vegas 64% of the time, year after year. You're just not done.
Yeah, and I thought it was weird, and I'm sure you did too, immediately. Oh, I'm not sure, maybe you didn't, to hear Wayne Allen Root say that he, you just think of him as having all these numbers in front of him, but then he goes on to say, well, I don't need to look at that. I look at this year. I look at what just happened. 7 years ago has no impact on what I'm doing. But in this case, sure it does.
Yeah. He said, look, Brian, I'm handicapping 3 sports at once. All I need to know is what they did the last 2 weeks. Yeah. I'm certainly not going to go back 2 years or 3 years. The team's completely different. I have no use for that data. But I am shocked when I bring it up and I talk to big-time bettors that they don't realize how far away they are from the rest of the league.
I'm mad that I didn't know that a long time ago.
I know, me too. That would have been helpful, right?
Probably could have benefited from being frustrated by that team all these years. Maybe could have made a little bit of money on it. Well, hopefully you are going to benefit from it. How's the book selling, and how has it been received everywhere other than New England?
Well, if any of your listeners want to jump on Amazon and read the reviews, it's getting very good reviews. People generally say things like every NFL fan should read it. It's amazing that this was swept under the rug. So I'm very pleased there. I've been getting a lot of publicity. I've done a lot of radio interviews and got some good book reviews. It is a self-published book, so it's something that I've sort of dipped into my savings and taken a little gamble. But I feel like with millions of fans out there, all I really have to do is sell a couple thousand books and I break even now that there's Kindle downloads and whatnot.
Sure.
So I've sold about 1,000 books so far, and the book's only been out since July, so I think it's doing very well.
And now we're into football season, and every little bit helps. Everybody who knows about it should seriously consider it. And we've got the Amazon link posted right in this post here at trendingbuffalo.com. So just click on that and go buy the book. I wouldn't. What I don't like to do is interview an author if I haven't read the book. And it's been, I buy way too many books, man. I've just got piles and piles, and this has been sitting and waiting, and I finally got to it, and I was about halfway through when I said, all right, I got to get in touch with this guy. Then I whipped through the rest of the book. Seriously, it took me three nights to read, and I'm busy, and I've got a 5-month-old baby in my house to deal with too. So
that's another thing I hear from a lot of people is that they thought that page turner quality was such that they just tore through it.
Yep.
They read it in 1 or 2 sittings.
Yep, it's a quick read and definitely recommend it. Brian, thank you so much for your time. Good luck with the book.
Well,
and,
thank you. Thanks for having me on.
All right, thank you very
Good
much.
Luck this year.
Yeah, 3-3. Everybody's 3-3. Everything's fine. All right, that's Brian O'Leary. The book again, Spygate: The Untold Story. Click on the link right here at Trending Buffalo and buy it. Typically, this is the part where I remind you to use our Amazon link, but that's the one you can use. Use that, buy it. It's a perfect system.